So let's get right into it. You can just keep eating. So we're here to talk about the rate and housing forecast for 2025. What's going to happen this coming year, right? Well, there's a lot of unknowns as we were talking about earlier, but we're going to go off of what the data has right now. We're making predictions based off of the data that we see and the data we expect to see. All right. So first and foremost, we can't talk about rates without talking about the Fed. Our friend Jerome Powell, right? We get to hear from him every so often. Last time we heard from him, he said they were expecting 25 basis point cuts in the Fed rate this year, 2025. That was a change from their previous prediction. So they changed their forecasts on a regular basis. So what they say is going to happen might. So right now, as of February 18th, this is the dot plot, and there are 19 Fed members, and they all basically voted what they think is going to happen next year. 10 of them basically say there is going to be 25 basis point cuts, right? Because right now we're at 4.375. We take 225s off, we're at 3.875. That's what 10 of the 19 think is going to happen, okay? Because that's what they told us, and that's based on what the information that they use at that moment. Now, MBS Highway, who I'm getting this data from, Barry Habib, if you guys have heard of him, this is him and his crew, they think the Fed's Fed fund rate is going to be 3.375. Now, we all know the Fed's fund rate is not mortgage rates. Mortgage rates are not tied to the Fed fund rates. They are related, they have an influence, but just because the Fed rate went up or down doesn't mean mortgage rates will go up or down. But it's a good indicator. So why do we think that the Fed is wrong? Why do we think that the Fed is why do we think the Fed's going to cut more, right? Well, first and foremost, unemployment, right? The Fed is going to be looking at unemployment. And right now, 14 of the Fed members think unemployment this coming year is going to be between 4.2 and 4.3%. We are at 4.1, 4.2. Yeah, 4.2. There we go. It's right there. Hey. So right now we're 4.2. So they're not expecting a lot of change in unemployment in the upcoming year. 5 members think it's going to go up a little bit, right? Well, what happens if the rate is actually a little bit higher? What if the rate goes to 4.4? If unemployment goes to 4.4, 14 of the members will be surprised, and they will have to revise their estimates, their forecast, right? So if we go back here, 14 of them, which includes these 10, are going to have to revise this if unemployment goes up. If it goes to 4.6, all 19 are going to have to reevaluate. Okay? Now, why do we think unemployment is going to go up? Well, there's a lot of different factors going into it, and we're going to get into those in a little bit here. So what do we think inflation is going to do? And first off, what is inflation? Inflation is basically too many dollars chasing too few goods, right? There's a lot of cash out there, not as many products. And we saw inflation skyrocketing in 21, 22, right? Because we were still bottlenecked on supply, but there was a lot of cash available. And that's what started the inflation. We were up around 9% at the worst, all right? Fortunately, we're much better off. So core PCE is 2.8. And what is core PCE versus non-core? Well, core strips out food and energy, which are very volatile. And it gives us a better indication of what inflation is really doing. Because fuel, right, oil, goes up and down a lot, not necessarily based on actual inflation, based on a lot of other factors. That's why they like to strip those out. And food, of course, can be weather dependent, right? We can have something go bad on a crop and something doesn't come in as well. So that's why they like to strip those out. Shelter is another big piece of the core PCE. It's 18%. 18% of this number, the PCE, is based on shelter. And shelter costs are rent for the most part, right? What are people paying for rent? So right now, it's 4.8% year over year, based on how the Fed likes to measure it, which is a 12-month rolling average. So a 12-month rolling average means that it's got 12 months of data. So we still have December 2023 data in this number, right? A year ago, right? Well, we know things are a little bit different. The CoreLogic Rent Index is much more current, much more real time. They're not holding on to this old data. So the realistic number for shelter inflation is 1.7. Right? This is a more realistic current number of what shelter inflation is doing. Did anybody know what the Fed target is? 2%. 2% inflation is what the Fed target is, right? So if we're looking at real numbers here, we're actually below Fed target on shelter, which is great, right? That means inflation's coming down. So if we adjust this PCE number based on real numbers, not 12 year-old numbers, 3.1% overstatement. And if we adjust for the weighting of the core, we're up. Our overall core PCE is 0.5% high, meaning we should be at 2.3%. All right, without the shelter lag. The lag being that we've got data that's 12 months old. All right, and every month an old month will drop off and a new one comes in. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more too. So that lag is really holding inflation higher than it actually is. So the Fed's looking at this number and not this number. If they were looking at this number, they'd be looking at overall inflation, or PCE measure of inflation is 2.3, which is way closer to our target, which is good news. We like that. Inflation down is a good thing, right? So monthly shelter readings in the PCE. This is each month how much shelter has gone up, right? So if we go back to February 23, shelter went up by 0.7% that month. But what's the trend? Down, right? We are seeing a downward trend here, which is great. I mean, right now, November 2024, we're looking at 0.22%, right, on a monthly basis, which is great. We're seeing this downward trend. So the 12-month rolling average is still hanging on to information from right here, right? They've still got this number, and they've still got this number, right? The January number is a big one. So let's look at what's going to be dropping off in the next few months. What numbers are dropping off? So we're expecting this number to be dropping off any day now. We should be getting these new numbers shortly. And then in January, we're going to drop off a 0.514. That's a big number. That's going to go away. And where are we at? Now this is November. We expect to be down in this area as well.
When you say shelter for rentals, does that include mortgage or just rentals?
This is rentals for the most part.
Okay.
Yeah.
Then why do people complaining rents are so high?
Because they still are. They're not going down. They're just going up slower.
Okay.
So, but in Central Oregon and Bend, there's a lot of empty units.
Really?
Yeah, they built a lot of apartments in the last 5 years, and there's a lot of empty units. I have a friend who manages the unit up by Skyliner. They went up there, and she's got empty units right now. She's trying to fill.
Where are the empty units?
Yeah, there is. So that actually has helped drive it down, because when you got an empty unit, you're going to lower the price to get someone in because it's more than zero, right? Any rent is more than zero. All right, so this is the shelter number we're expecting to drop off. These are the core PCE numbers we're expecting to drop off in the next 2 months, right? We see these high numbers are going to be going away. This is good news. That 12-month rolling average is going to look a lot better. And the Fed's going to look at that and go, oh, look at that. Shelter's lower than we thought. Well, yeah, dummies, we told you in the other number, but you don't pay attention to that number. But, you know. All right, so let's talk about inflation, right? Just because inflation is slowing doesn't mean prices are going down. Inflation is the rate of price increases. So the red line here, we're going back to mid-80s, right? Mid-80s, where inflation was, I mean, well, look at that, almost 15%, right? And rates, mortgage rates those days were, 12, 13, 14%, right? Just insane. Then you saw them drop off, and you can see the gray area recessions, right? Recessions always bring inflation down. The gray areas are recessions. But every time, every bit of inflation adds up. The blue line is the cumulative effect. Prices are not going down, except for right here. We saw some price decreases there, right? We saw inflation drop down. But otherwise, the cumulative effect keeps going up and up and up and up, right? The 2% inflation rate is the target, but it still means prices are going to be going up on a regular basis. That is the nature of the U.S. economy. All right. So what else goes into to the mortgage rates, right? And the Fed's numbers? Labor. They're paying attention to jobs. Who's got jobs? Who's looking for jobs? All right. Unemployment rate. 4.2 right now. All right. What's the trend? If we look at the trend, 3.4 to 4.2, we are trending up from January 2023. So over the last 2 years, unemployment has been rising. Obviously some dips, ups and downs, but we are trending up in unemployment. So if we continue that trend out, we can expect unemployment to continue to rise, which goes back to the earlier when I said that we expect unemployment to be 4.4, maybe even 4.6, right? This is an interesting one. Median duration unemployed. How long is somebody unemployed after they get fired? How long does it take them to find a new job? You see this trend, it's taking longer. 21% increase in the last 7 months of how long it's taking to find a new job once they get canned, or made redundant, as the British like to say. All right, so that's a trend we're looking at, going, oh, this is not a good sign for people looking for work. Now, in my industry, we're horrible people. We cheer for unemployment numbers. We cheer for high unemployment. because what high unemployment means is the economy is slowing down, which means the Fed's going to lower their rate, which means inflation's coming down, which means rates will come down.
Got it.
Everybody draw that really fast line I drew? Basically, inflation bad for rates, right? High inflation, high rates, low inflation, low rates is the basic of it. Let's also be looking at companies that are closing stores. These are all companies who have announced store closings. Not necessarily closing the business, some are, some aren't. Number of stores, 850, 580, 700, 1,200 from Walgreens. How many people work at a Walgreens? Each store? Dozen? 20? Right? Macy's, how many people work at a Macy's? 100? 150? Right? All these people, right? Number of stores, high number of people are getting laid off. Right? These are closings that have happened and will be happening. All right? So a lot of people are laying off workers for brick and mortar stores. So job openings, the JOLTS, job opening labor turnover study. Looking at number of job openings over time. So we go back to January 2022, right? 12 million. Now we're looking at 7.7 million. All right? Now, so we're seeing lower job openings. Now, a couple things to keep in mind. Some of these jobs are online jobs, right? Work from home, which means they post in multiple states, which means some of these jobs are being overcounted, right? Also, there are companies, I read an article on this recently, who are basically putting ghost postings out there. They're putting postings for jobs to make it look like they're hiring, to make it look like their business is growing, but they never actually hire anybody.
Really?
Yeah, it's happening. Not a lot, but it's some. So this number is overstated. By how much, we're not exactly sure, but we can pretty much guarantee it's overstated. So there's less jobs. I think there's less than 7.7. All right? So lower job openings.
More people out of work and less jobs available.
Higher unemployment. Higher employment is going to make the Fed think twice about their predictions. All right? All right. So what's going to happen with rates? All right? How is this going to impact mortgage rates? So let's talk about the 10-year Treasury. Now, the 10-year Treasury is a pretty good indicator of what rates are going to be doing. Not exactly by what the rate is, but we can look. This is 10-year Treasury back to mid-2023, right? Lots of ups and downs. Lots of ups and downs. On this chart, up is bad. That means rates are going up. Down is good. We like to see down. We had some downs, and then we've been going up for the last little while, okay? So, we're around 4.6 probably. Yeah, right about 4.6 in the 10-year Treasury. Target, we're hoping to get to 3.6. This is what we're hoping to have happen as the economy slows down. We're going to see the 10-year Treasury drop down to 3.6, right? That's good. We want to see it getting back down here to where we were just this last September, right? And we were mid-6s, right? Low 6s. Got a couple of clients in the high 5s, right? Great. We love that. It's fantastic. We can work with that. Fortunately, people are starting to realize that 3 and 4% rates are gone. Took a few years for people to understand that. I haven't had anybody ask me that for about a year. So, but for the longest time, I want 3%. That's cute. We all do. That ship has sailed, unfortunately. So we're probably going to be getting, into a lower rate, but not that low. All right. So what we want to be watching now is the spread between the 10-year and mortgage rates. Right? There's always a spread of you got your 10-year and then your mortgage rates are above it. So what is that spread? Well, let's take a look at what it has been historically. This is going back to 2000, all right? Now you can see the ups and downs of the spread, and this blue line is the spread. So right here was just about 2.4, right? So if the Treasury rate, say it was, just say 4 to make the math simple, right? Plus 2.4, 6.4. Right? That's the average 30-year fixed rate in that particular, with that math. You can see the trend, excluding the crazy bars, right? Recessions. In general, we're between 1.6 and 2.0 is the spread. COVID, it went jump crazy. Part of that because rates were at 0, and lenders like, well, 0 plus something is a lot. But even then, it was still a low rate overall. Then we did some bouncing, right? We hit a high of 3.1% spread, which is a really high spread. The reason for that is lenders were looking at these high rates, like, oh, you're at 7.5%, 8%. We expect you to refinance very quickly. Lenders don't like that. They want the loan to pay out for a while. They make their money on the monthly payments and the interest. If it refinances quickly, they're not making as much money. So they were hedging their bets by even raising rates a little bit more to help offset that cost. Now we're seeing it come down. We're at 2.5 right now. So we're doing better, right? Where do we think we're going to get to? Well, we're hoping the 10-year treasury is going to get to 3.6, right? Hoping the spread narrows down to 2.25. Based on all the jobs and everything else we've been talking about before, we're expecting that spread to narrow to 2.5. Not quite down to the 2 that we're hoping, really, really hoping for, the historic average. So we're looking at a 30-year rate, potentially at 5.87, 5.85, right? Below 6. How many clients do you have who would be jumping for joy if we get below 6? Pulling the trigger on that house they've been waiting on, right? I think this is slightly optimistic. This is a little more conservative numbers. So let's say the 10-year treasury gets down to 3.75. All right, not quite down to 3.6, but pretty good. And our spread narrows to 2.5 from 3.5. 6.25. Do you have clients who move at that? Right? 6.25 is not bad. And realistically, I think for the next year, we're going to be in the mid to low 6s. We'll have dips below 6 occasionally. We'll have some spikes above 7 occasionally, depending on what's happening. The trick is getting your clients lined up and ready to go. So when we hit those dips, we can pull the trigger and lock their rate.
Yeah.
When they say, when the rates dip and the client's like, oh, now I'm ready to move forward, but they haven't put an application in, they haven't looked at houses, they haven't done anything, we're going to miss it. Some of these dips are a day, maybe 2, right? Oh yeah, my job is to watch daily. When I have clients who we're waiting, right, and we're floating, I'm watching daily, and I'm picking up the phone once a week saying, here's where we're at. And when we hit the right point, I call them and say, this is where we're at. This is what I think we should do. I think we should lock it in here. We have a saying that pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered, right? If you're waiting for that best rate, you're probably going to miss the good rate, right? Would you rather have a good rate that you've got locked in, or wait and hope that you get maybe an eighth better, save $20 a month, when we're going to refinance you in a year and a half anyways? Right? So why fight over $20 a month when you're risking $200 a month if the rates go up on you?
And you're risking losing out on the home.
And you can no longer qualify. Yep. So I think we're going to be, on the low side, 5.875 to 2.5, 6.25 is where we're going to be on the low side. Those are going to be the sweet spots. When we're getting into this range, we're talking about locking. Okay. For above that, we're going to see if we can float and see what's going on in the economy and what's going on and what's happening and what's not happening. So there's a lot of things that change all of this. I mean, none of this is set in stone, right? It's a crystal ball. It's very foggy. What's going to happen with real estate? In general, home prices are still trending up, right? We are seeing some price reduction on higher end stuff, usually like 1.2 and above. I've seen price reductions because people who are spending that kind of money want their house to be ready to go. They don't want a fixer-upper. Not spending 1.2 and above to have a fixer-upper.
Anyway.
So let's look at this is the U.S. housing market. This is country as a whole. We've got 136 million households. All right, so it's not people, households. 45 million of those are rented. 91 million are owned. The people who own have 37 trillion in equity built up. Right, so 407,000 average equity per homeowner. Renters have zero equity. Right?
Someone has my equity.
Somebody's paying, renters are paying somebody else's equity, right? So let's break down the owned ones. Free and clear, 35 million homes are owned free and clear. $20 trillion in equity there, average of 571,000 in equity per home. And for mortgage people, 311,000 in equity, right? And then in negative equity, we've got 1 million in negative equity. Now, if we go back to 2010, right? That number was way higher. So we're actually trending better on this. The home values are coming up and people are getting out from being underwater. So I don't think it'll ever be zero. Somebody's always going to overpay. It's just the nature of the beast. All right. What's coming up? Who's going to be buying in the future? Let's talk about demographics, right? Yeah, this is a fun one. So let's talk about our boomer friends here, right? These are my parents. 71 million boomers right now. Right now, 74% of boomers own a home, right? Great. Makes sense. When they were 30, 48% of them owned a home. And when they were 40, 65% of them owned a home. All right, so that's great. We like to see that. Kind of give us an idea of the trends. Gen X, this is my generation, 65 million of us. 65% own homes right now. 42 owned when they were 30. I'm trying to think, did I own it 30? When did I bought my first house in 2005. Yes, right at 30. I had to do the math there. So 42% owned a home at 30, and then 59% owned when they were 40. Right. So let's talk about millennials. All right. Current home ownership rate is 45%. Obviously lower. Now let's keep in mind they're younger, right? 28 to 43. Median age is 35. So when they get to 30, because not all of them are 30 yet, 33%, right, are homeowners at this point. What does that mean going forward? So over the next 10 years, we expect the home ownership rate of millennials to go from 33 to 55%, which means 8.5 million more buyers of millennials in the next 10 years nationwide. Okay?
So that's a good demographic to look at.
Yep, millennials, because if you can get them off their phones. I'm getting to the point, you kids these days. Just getting ready to yell at someone to get off my lawn. So we're looking at a significant number of buyers coming up in the next 10 years. All right. Now, Gen Z, obviously, 12-year-olds are not buying homes yet. Right. So this number is going to be low at the moment. But let's look at what if the trend continues. Right. We are expecting right now, so we're at 8%. If they get to 33%, if they do the same as millennials, right, 17 million more buyers in the next 10 years. All right, so we got 8.5 and 17, so 25.5 million new buyers in the next 10 years, right? That's a lot of buyers, all right? So should we be focusing on boomers? I mean, most of them own a home, and those who don't are probably in a retirement community like my mom is, right? Gen X, yeah, there's some you could be focusing on. Where's the real money, right? Millennials and Gen Z. So let's talk about, so we know we got 25.5 million buyers coming in the next 10 years, right? Let's look at inventory. So we're looking back, where are we starting in January, right? 17. You can see this trend down, right? Now we're seeing some up increase recently, which is great. This is where we should be, 1.2 million homes a year, right, of listings. What are we at here? What is this? Under a million? Under a million listings a year, right? If we do the simple math of 25.5 million people, buyers coming on in the next 10 years, that's 2.5 per year, right? But we've only got listings of under a million. Ooh, there's a problem. Supply and demand, right? So what does that do to house prices? Drives them up. All right. We've also increased population, 12 million from 2008 to today.
And that population is declining. But I think isn't it the Asians and the Hispanics that are having the...
We always have immigration as well, not just birth. I mean, the U.S. birth rate, I think, is close to, I think it's actually 1.9. 2 is replacement. I think the U.S. birth rate is 1.9. So we are under replacement for people living in the U.S., but we still have immigration. So household formations, right? We can ignore the big blips of 2020 and 2021, right? If we average those out, we're still right in this yellow bar. 1.915 household formations per year right now, right? How many listings do we have? 900,000, right? Supply. So this is housing starts. How many homes are being built, right? And starts, not completed, just starts, because new construction can take anywhere from 3 to 12 months, right? 1.289. Well, we're forming at 1.9. We're only building 1.289, and we've got 900,000 listings. But of those listings, how many of them are new construction, right? So we don't get to combine 1.2 and 900, right? The realistic number, I mean, I don't like that they combine these two. I would rather see the formations and the listings. I think that is the better comparison. 1.9 formations, 1.9 million formations per year, 900,000 listings per year. Right?
Where are they living? They're having to rent.
Mom's basement. Right? They can't live in a van down by the river anymore. That's too expensive. I mean, those vans are $80,000. So prices are going to continue to rise overall, all right? Especially in the under a million price range, right? Because you get over a million, you price a ton of people out.
Yeah.
All right. So What do we think is going to happen for 2025? We're expecting home prices to increase 4.1% year over year. Right? So if we look at a $500,000 home, $20,000 in gain over the year. Right? So if they were to buy a house now at 500, if they waited a year, they're going to buy it for 520. And in Bend, I think that's a little low. I think Bend's going to be closer to 5%. People want to live here. Right? So instead of paying 500 this next year, they're going to pay 525. Right? 5-year cumulative nationwide, 30 to 35%. So if you hold that home for 5 years, you're gaining anywhere from $150,000 to $175,000 in equity. I think in Bend it's going to be closer to 2. All right. So here's the overall forecast. This is what the too long didn't read. Right. Home appreciation 4 to 4.5% year over year. Core PCE inflation 2.1 to 2.2 from 2.8. We're expecting that inflation to come down significantly, very close to the Fed target, which is great. Unemployment rate 4.5 to 4.6 from 4.2 where we're at right now. So as that unemployment goes up, we're expecting the Fed to readjust, right? Fed funds rate 3.25 to 3.5, currently 4.375. I still think that's a bit optimistic. I think 3.75 is probably a more realistic number personally. I don't always agree with everything that Barry Habib says. And mortgage rates declined to 5.75 to 6% from 7%. Again, I think that's a bit rosy. I think we're going to be, like I said, 5.875 to 6.25. So I tend to be a little bit more cautious in my estimates. Barry loves to be he's a bit of a cheerleader sometimes. He's like, hey, everything's great. Get out there and create business, which, okay, cool. But
What are we at right now?
The Fed rate? Mortgage rates. Great question. Great question. Thank you for the segue. All right. So this was as of 11:30 this morning. This is the bond market. All right. So PCI or CPI came out. Consumer Price Index. Yeah, CPI. And the core was way better than expected. Right. It was better than hoped. So we'd stripped out energy and food, and the bond market loved it. On this chart, up is good. All right. This is a good indicator of what rates are doing. It's an inverse relationship. So up is good on the bond market. Friday, the jobs number came out, well, and we say weaker than expected from our standpoint, meaning that more people had jobs. If it was better than we'd hoped, less people would have jobs because we're horrible people. But seeing that inflation is coming down, the market is loving this today. We're up 54 basis points today, which is, as you can see, huge. That's a big day. Let's look at the Treasury. It's 10-year Treasury. Right, we talked about this earlier. Big drop. Now we're down to what, 4.7? Granted, target's 3.6, right, way down here. And it was a while ago we saw that. But we are finally turning a bit of a corner. We move below what we call a floor of resistance. Right, so now that we're below it, it becomes a ceiling of resistance. So it makes it harder for bonds to punch through that, have to have some big news. So these are numbers from an hour ago. These are great numbers. We're seeing the market turn. Yay!